Hello and welcome back to Prep Alpine, the next generation UPSC institution. With only 91 days remaining for your UPSC Prelims 2026, we have come with a power packed series that will take your preparation to the next level. We are starting with the Prelims Power Practice 2026 sessions, where we discuss MCQs from every subject in the exam format. With these MCQs, you can not only revise your entire syllabus but also test yourself on where you lie in this race. So let us start with today's session. We are starting with Modern History Revision series, and the topic for today is the advent of the Europeans. The PDF of this lecture will be available on our Telegram channel, the link to which is in the description as well as in this PDF. Apart from this, we also provide these high quality PDFs and more questions which can be downloaded from our website as well as our Telegram channel. So let us start with the questions for today. For the first question is, who was the first European to reach India by direct sea route? We have a mix of questions here. Easy questions, moderate questions, and hard questions designed exactly on the UPSC pattern. So पहला सवाल है, who was the first European to reach India by direct sea route? So we all know that Vasco da Gama arrived India via sea route for the first time in India, and he arrived in 1498 in Calicut, and the ruler of Calicut at that time was Zamorin. So this becomes very, very important. When we talk of Cornelis D. Houtman, so he was associated with Dutch voyages later. William Hawkins came as an English envoy in the early 17th century, and Francois Martin founded Pondicherry much later under the French expansion. The second question, Battle of Diu secured Portuguese. Battle of Diu was in 1509. So what was its impact? Did it secure for the Portuguese control over Bengal textiles, naval dominance in the Indian Ocean, alliance with the Mughals, or control over Coromandel coast? So we all know that Portuguese were very efficient in naval operations. So this Battle of Diu of 1509 secured them naval dominance in the Indian Ocean. Very, very important. Next question. The Dutch East India Company, whose official name was VOC, was established in 1596, 1600, 1602, or 1608. So the Dutch East India Company was established in 1608. And why is it called VOC? Because its official name was, or in Dutch it was called Verenigde Oost-Indische Campaign, or VOC, and it was officially formed in 1600 through a charter granted by the Dutch Parliament. It was the first joint stock company to issue bonds and shares of stock to the general public. This was the first East India Company to be established. Then came the English East India Company, the French East India Company, and many more. Next question. Pondicherry was founded in 1673. So it is asking, who founded Pondicherry? Joseph Francois Dupleix or JF Dupleix, Francois Martin, Jean Baptiste Colbert, or Count de Lally. So we have read just now that Francois Martin, who was a French official, he founded Pondicherry in 1673. Dupleix was also a French governor, but he came very much later. Colbert guided the company formation in France, the French East India Company, and Count de Lally, who was a French governor, he arrived during the Third Carnatic War in India. The next question for the day is the Battle of Vandy Wash. The 1760 Battle of Vandy Wash resulted in restoration of Madras to the French, end of Dutch military power, end of French military power, or the British defeat in the Carnatic. So this Battle of Vandy Wash was very important when it comes to the battle between the English and the French, because this was a decisive battle which made English the sole supreme European power in the Indian Union, because it ended the French land power in India. The Portuguese were already sidelined, the Dutch were already sidelined, and they were restored only only to their spice trade towards Indonesia. So the remaining contending players were the English and the French. And this Battle of Vandy Wash restricted the French to a land power in India. So this was a decisive blow, the turning point of the Third Carnatic War. The British forces here were led by Sir Eyre Coote and the French army was led by Count de Lally. And this defeat completely shattered the French influence in India and established the British as the sole final European power in the Indian Union. The next question, Battle of Plassey was fought in. Very easy question, but very conceptual question. 1756, 1757, 1764 or 1765. So we all know that the Battle of Plassey was fought in 1757. Why was this fought? This was fought between Siraj ud Daula, who was the governor, the Nawab of Bengal, versus Robert Clive from the British side. And we all know that this was the first step towards the consolidation of rule in Bengal by the British. And after this Battle of Plassey, the dual rule was implemented, or you can say not the dual rule was implemented, but you can say that the British started their economic expansion in Bengal. They became the sole trader of Bengal. So it was a decisive victory for the British East India Company under the leadership of Robert Clive. The year 1764, we all know that it is the year of Battle of Buxar, and 1765 is the year of Treaty of Allahabad. So this Battle of Plassey made the British gain political dominance in Bengal, after which they realized that they can expand to other parts of India as well. Next question. The Battle of Buxar was fought under the British leadership of बैटल ऑफ बक्सर किसकी नेतृत्व में हुआ था रॉबर्ट क्लाइव आयर कूट मेजर हेक्टर मुनरो और स्ट्रिंगर लॉरेंस सो द बैटल ऑफ बक्सर इफ वी टॉक अबाउट बॉब और द बैटल ऑफ बक्सर वाज बिटवीन द ब्रिटिश and on the other side we have three forces. One is of the Mughals under Shah Alam II. Second is of Bengal under Mir Qasim. And the third, if we talk about, is Awadh under Awadh Nawab, Shujaud Daula. So this Battle of Buxar was fought in British versus the three combined forces of the Mughals, Bengal and Awadh. But British under Major Hector Munro completely defeated the combined forces of the Mughal, Bengal and Awadh. And after this only the Treaty of Allahabad was signed, which gave the company the consolidated control over Bengal, Odisha and Mughals as well. So who led the Battle of Buxar from the British side? So it was Major Hector Munro. Let us proceed with the next question. The Treaty of Allahabad granted the company. So the Treaty of Allahabad granted what rights to the company? Did it grant sovereignty over the Carnatic? Did it grant Diwani rights over Bengal, Bihar and Odisha? Did it grant control over French settlements, or did it grant control over the Portuguese trading companies? So we have read just now that the Treaty of Allahabad of 1765 was signed after the Battle of Buxar, and it granted Diwani rights to the company over Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. So what are Diwani rights? So Diwani rights means revenue collection rights. So the revenue collection remained with the British, and the judicial administrative functions, which are called the Nizamat, these remained with the Nawab. And this is what is called the dual rule. Dual rule or the dual government. Let us proceed with the next question. In the dual government, Diwani referred to judicial authority, revenue collection rights, military command, or diplomatic powers. So we all know that the revenue collection rights are known as Diwani. The judicial authority is known as the Nizamat, and this resided with the Nawab. You can remember it as Nizamat, N for Nizamat and N for Nawab. Next question is the black hole incident occurred after the fall of. So the black hole incident is an alleged incident where Siraj ud Daula confined some Britishers in a room and tortured them. It does not have a proper proof for it, but still there are papers which mention that such kind of an incident occurred, due to which the conflict between Sirajuddaula and the British started. So it occurred after the fall of Madras, Fort St. David, Fort William or Arcot. So it occurred after the fall of Fort William, which is located in Calcutta. Next question. With reference to the decline of Portuguese power, consider the following statements. Decline of the Portuguese power. The Cartes system alienated Indian merchants. So the Portuguese were the ones to introduce Cartes system in the maritime area, the Indian Ocean region and the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea region. They introduced a special policy of Cartes. So this alienated the Indian merchants, yes, because it was only used by the Portuguese merchants. Second, Iberian Union strengthened Portuguese resources in India. And the third, failure to modernize naval strategy weakened Portuguese power. So initially they were very good naval power, but later they failed to modernize their resources. So this is also true, but this is not true. Iberian Union did not strengthen Portuguese resources. In fact, it weakened the Portuguese resources. So our second statement will be wrong. So B will be our answer. So if you know a single statement also, then you can eliminate and reach towards your answer. Moving on, next question, assertion reason type. Assertion is the Second Carnatic War arose from Indian succession disputes, and it was mainly an extension of European wars. So this Second Carnatic War did arise from Indian succession disputes. This is true, but this was not an extension of European wars. So the first and third Carnatic Wars, these two were extension of European wars between the British and the French, but the Second Carnatic War was originally because of succession dispute between two Indian regional powers. So this was not a result of the dispute between French and the British. Next question is, you have to match the battles with their significance. Battle of Saint Thom, Battle of Bedada, Battle of Vandewash. So battle of and the options that you have is demonstration of European military superiority, Dutch defeat by the British, or end of French land power. So we all know that Battle of Vandewash of 1763 ended French land power in India. Battle of Bedada, which is also known as Battle of Hooghly or the Battle of Chinsura, all these are same. This led to Dutch defeat by the British, and Battle of Saint Thom demonstrated European military superiority. So A option 1A, 2B and 3C will be our answer. Next question. 14th question. Dupleix shadow diplomacy involved. So Dupleix was a French governor and he used to follow a policy of shadow diplomacy. Now, what does shadow diplomacy mean? Naval blockade, supporting Indian claimants in succession dispute, religious conversion, or direct annexation. So, shadow diplomacy means you are not directly involved in diplomacy, but behind the back you are involved in diplomacy. So, this means supporting Indian claimants in succession dispute. So, what he used to do is he used to support one of the parties in succession dispute, and if he or she used to win, then he was a puppet ruler in the hands of Dupleix or the French. For example, he supported Muzaffar Jung in Hyderabad. He supported Chanda Sahib in Karnataka. So this was his way of installing puppet rulers that supported French and not the British. The goal was to allow French to control large territories and resources indirectly through puppet rulers without legal burden of direct annexation, and this policy of Dupleix became extremely successful and was later adopted by the British East India Company in the name of subsidiary alliance. Next question is, which of the following was not a feature of Dutch policy in India? Dutch policy was centered around many things which was not a part of it. Trade-centered approach, missionary expansion, factory system, or naval strength. So yes, the Dutch policy was a trade-centered approach. It did follow a factory system and they were very good at naval strength, but they did not care about missionary expansion. Because it was a private company, it was not a public company that was focused on proselytization or religious conversions. Later, one or two incidents are known, but initially they were just a trading company. Now comes the Third Carnatic War. With reference to the Third Carnatic War, consider the following. Recall of Bassi weakened French power in the Deccan. Bassi was a French governor. Treaty of Paris allowed French fortifications, or the British naval supremacy cut French supply lines. So yes, recall of Bassi weakened the French power in the Deccan. British naval supremacy did cut the French supply lines, but the Treaty of Paris did not allow French fortifications. It did restore many of the territories of the French, but it did not allow for fortifications. In fact, whatever fortifications were there, they were asked to be removed. So 1 and 3 will be our answer. Moving on, next question. The dual government system collapsed within 7 years. So when was it implemented? We need to understand 1762. And when was it removed? So it was removed in 1772. Or you can say by Regulating Act of 1773. So yes, it did collapse within 7 years. So first assertion is correct. Second, it caused administrative paralysis and economic exploitation. So for this, we need to understand the dual government once again. So in dual government, you have two functions, revenue functions and administrative functions. Revenue resided with British. Administrative or the Nizamat functions resided with the Nawab. But for administrative functions, you need money. And if you will not have money, so what will happen? Administration will collapse. And if one person has only money and no power, no responsibility, so he will obviously exploit the people economically. So yes, both A and R are true, and R explains A correctly. So A will be our answer. Next question. The Diwani grant of 1765 enabled the company to. So we know that the Diwani grant means what? So revenue rights. So revenue rights helped in what? Controlling law and justice, financing military operation, or restoring Mughal authority, or ending the Nawabi rule immediately. So the Nawab rule did not end immediately. Mughal authority did not restore. Law and justice were a part of Nawab's Nizamat function. So the only option that we are left with is financing military expansion. The Diwani rights collected many resources with the British. The British had so much money that now they could expand their military and take over the territories of India. So whatever money they got, they used it to self-fund their conquest of India. Next question, very important question. With reference to European commercial and political expansion in India during the 17th and the 18th centuries, consider the following statements. The East India Company transitioned from a trading body to a territorial power was formally initiated by Charter of 1600, which granted sovereign rights to wage war and conclude treaties. This statement is not true because Charter of 1600 made the company only a trading body, nothing else. So first statement is true. So which options can we eliminate? We can eliminate option A and option C. Now let us read a second option, second statement. The Dutch East India Company was the first to implement a professional covenanted civil service to manage its commercial factories in India. Covenanted civil service. Did the Dutch implement it? No, the Dutch did not implement it. The British were the first to implement a covenanted civil service, which is now known as the Civil Service of India. So second option, second statement is also wrong. So this D option will also go away, and the only option that we are left with B, 3 and 4. The French policy of intervention in Indian succession disputes served as a precursor and technical template to the British subsidiary alliance. Yes, Duplex introduced this in a system of shadow diplomacy or policy of intervention. Secondly, while the Portuguese cartes system aimed at maritime monopoly, the English dastaks were primarily used to bypass internal transit duties in hinterlands of Bengal. So yes, 3 and 4 are correct. Now let us move to the next question. Which of the following best explains British success over other European powers? Why were the British successful and the Dutch could not succeed, Portuguese could not succeed, French could not succeed? Did they have a missionary zeal? No, they did not have a missionary zeal. Did they have pure trade focus? No, they did not purely focus on trade. Did they fuse commerce, diplomacy, and military power? Yes, they fused commerce, diplomacy, and military power. Did they avoid Indian politics? No, not at all. They did participate in several of the Indian political matters. So the C option, which means they combined trade, diplomacy, and commerce, diplomacy, and military power. How? So commerce means it granted them commercial wealth. Diplomatic mastery, divide and rule, subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse. So many policies were there that gave them a diplomatic mastery. And lastly, their military innovation. All this helped them integrate fiscally and politically. Moving on. Next question. With reference to the Portuguese in India, consider the following statements. They combined naval dominance with missionary activities. Yes, Portuguese were a lot involved in missionary activities. Second question, they successfully modernized their naval power to counter Dutch and English challenges. And lastly, the Cartes system alienated Indian merchants and rulers. The third statement is correct, but the second statement is not at all correct because the Portuguese could not modernize their naval systems, and that is why they could not succeed the Dutch and the English. So 1 and 3 will be our answer. Moving on, 22nd question. With reference to the Dutch East India Company, consider the following statements. So we know that the Dutch East India Company was formed in 1602. It was empowered to wage war and conclude treaties. It actively intervened in Indian succession disputes to gain territory, and its primary focus was Indian textiles and spices. So this statement is correct. It was empowered to wage war and conclude treaties. This Dutch East India Company was a trading company, so it was not empowered to wage wars and conclude treaties. So this statement goes wrong. So the only answer we are left with is 2 and 3. Next question. The First Carnatic War demonstrated the superiority of European military discipline over traditional Indian forces. A small French force defeated the Nawab's army at the Battle of Saint Thom. The First Carnatic War demonstrated the superiority of European military discipline over traditional Indian forces. Yes, the First Carnatic War was one of the first wars which made us realize that the Indian traditional forces, the traditional ways of our fighting was nowhere close to what the Europeans used. The modern artillery, the machines that they had, we did not have it. Reason? A small French force defeated the Nawab's large army at the Battle of Saint Thom. Yes, a French force of 1,000 defeated the Nawab's 10,000 army at the Battle of Saint Thom. So both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. 24th question. With reference to the Second Carnatic War, consider the following statements. It originated primarily in the European conflicts. It involved succession disputes between Hyderabad and Carnatic. Yes, it was between Hyderabad and Carnatic. It marked transformation of European companies into political stakeholders. Yes, this was also true. But did it originate from European conflicts? No. The first and the third Carnatic Wars originated from European conflicts, but the second one was originally in India between the Hyderabad and the Carnatic. So 2 and 3 will be our answer. The first is not true. Moving on, next question. We have to match the following events with their outcomes. Battle of Bedada, which we have already discussed. It was also known as Battle of Chinsura, Battle of Hooghly. It confined Dutch to commerce. They were only confined to commerce, no land, no politics, nothing else. Battle of Vandewash, it ended French power, and Treaty of Paris 1763, the French were denied fortifications. Though their land territories were restored, but they were denied fortifications. Next question. With reference to the black hole incident, consider the following statement. It followed the capture of Calcutta by Sirajud-Dowlah. True. It became a justification for British military retaliation. Yes, this is also true. And its numerical details were later questioned by the historians. This is also true. So 1, 2, and 3 all are correct. Next question is with reference to Battle of Plassey, consider the following statements. It was decided by largely by military strength alone. Battle of Plassey. Was it decided by military strength alone? Mir Jafar played a crucial role through betrayal. Yes, he betrayed the Nawab of Bengal, that is Sirajud-Dowla, and that is why Sirajud-Dowla was defeated. It resulted in immediate Diwani rights for the company. No, the Diwani rights of the company were granted in 1765. Through which act, through which treaty? The Treaty of Allahabad granted Diwani rights to the company. So third is wrong, second is correct. So which option is correct? Is what it was largely decided by military strength alone? No, it was not decided by military strength alone. There were several other factors. So only two is correct. Next question. The Battle of Buxar had greater constitutional significance than Battle of Plassey. Yes, Battle of Buxar, Treaty of Allahabad was signed after the Battle of Buxar, which granted the Diwani rights to the company over Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. It led to the grant of Diwani rights to the company. Yes, so both A and R are true and R is the correct explanation of A. Next question. With reference to dual government in Bengal, consider the following statement. Dual government implemented by Robert Clive in 1765. The company exercised Diwani while Nawab retained Nizamat. True. The company assumed full responsibility for administration. No, it is not true. It was abolished in 1772. True. So 1 and 3 will be our answer. Last question for the day. Which one of the following best explains the long-term success of the British over other European powers in India? Exclusive focus on missionary expansion. No, they were not focused on missionary expansion. Who was focused on missionary expansion? Portuguese were focused on missionary expansion. Avoidance of Indian political affairs. Did they avoid Indian political affairs? No, they were actively involved in Indian political affairs through subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, and several other policies. Integration of fiscal control, diplomacy, and disciplined military power. Yes, this is true. And last, concentration solely on maritime trade. No, this is also not true. Though the French were focused on maritime trade, the Portuguese were focused on maritime trade, but the British were not solely focused on maritime trade. So these are the most important questions from the Advent of the Europeans chapter. Similarly, we will discuss several other questions depending on the amount of questions asked in last 10 years. So in last 10 years, around 10 to 12 questions were asked from this Advent of the Europeans. So we have discussed around 30 questions. Next topics will be in proportion to the number of questions asked in last 10 years in your UPSC Prelims. So that's it for this video. If you want more such content, please subscribe to the channel and keep watching Prep Alpine. Thank you.